I wish I had learned this truth many years ago. Be thankful for the days, good and bad.
All right, welcome to another episode of Warrior versus Zombie, and I've got another amazing guest for you, Don Huff, and I'll talk about him in just a second. But first, let me remind you of what Warrior versus Zombie is all about. Success is a journey. It's not a destination. As warriors, we all have a history of ups and downs and wins and losses that are all part of making us who we are up to this point, and they provide a foundation for our path forward. We all battle our inner zombie as well as those zombies in our world. In each episode, I interview warriors who are aspiring leaders from all walks of life. Entrepreneurs, artists, health practitioners, business owners, authors, you name it. Any inspired leader that has a story to tell. These warriors have a cause, they have unique value, and they have vision that goes generations into the future, and today's guest is no exception. Don Huff is an amazing warrior. He's a husband, a graphic artist, entrepreneur, and teacher. His 33-year warrior journey began after graduating from college, drawing cartoons as a graphic artist for the Richardson Daily News, Dallas Morning News, and San Antonio Express News. His clients include the Mankind Project, Austin Family Magazine, Dreamsculpt Authors, Wichita Museum of Art, Texas Instruments, BWC Creative, University of North Texas, SMU, Boy Scouts of America, the USO, Children's Medical Center, the City of Plano, the Sixth Floor Museum, the State Fair of Texas, and Texas Parks and Wildlife, and really countless entrepreneurs. Don has won many news awards, including earning a Pulitzer Prize for graphics and international reporting. And Don has a passion for teaching and recently has embarked on a mission to educate the next generation of designers. He's also very passionate about art, music, and cats. So Don, welcome to Warrior versus Zombie. How's things on your side of town these days, since we're both in the DFW area?
Oh, things are going well over here. Glad last year was over. It was difficult. I'm hoping this year is going to be a lot more productive and opening up.
Yeah, you've had some significant challenges over the last year, I know, and those are some of those events become zombies if we're not careful, and delay us and those kinds of things. So I know you've been doing that, and I know you've recently back into the flow of things, and that's brilliant. That's what warriors do, and that's why I'm excited to have you as a featured warrior on this episode, is just to do what I can to make sure people know how amazing you are and what a warrior you are in this space, because I think a lot of us in the Be Connected community, as well as here in DFW and beyond, can use the value that you can provide. So any other significant things going on? I know we both have a beautiful day out here today. It looks
it is a nice day. Yeah, it is a nice day. Just middle of the week, working with my clients, taking care, being a caretaker, being a house husband, being a cat daddy.
Yeah, well, I have several granddaughters coming over this weekend, so I don't have any cats unless I watch my grandcats sometimes, but I'll be herding cats all weekend with these kids. So, well, let's do this. Let's take a quick break. We'll hear a little bit for the audio audience of Ricky Jean Wright and our theme song, "It's Not the Getting There." And we'll be right back to hear your story, Don, on Warrior versus Zombie.
But the miles become the teacher while the student learns real slow, traveling blind most of the time. Wherever you go, it's not the getting there, It's the journey every day. It's not a race to see.
All right, we are back, and Don, good check-in. I'm excited that you're here, and as I said before we took the quick break, let's hear your story. How did you get from your starting place, which I know, like me, there's we could spend all day talking about all the things that we've gone through, but tell me from where you started on your warrior journey to today. Tell us a little bit about how you got from where you are today, from there to today.
All right, thanks for asking, Dave. Ever since I could remember as a small child, I've always wanted to be an artist and was always drawing pictures. I think Snoopy was the first one, and Wally the Worm, my own character. And in high school and in college, I took every art class there was. I went to, had to just knew I was going to be an artist. I didn't know what kind. Went to an arts magnet school in high school and went on to East Texas State University, which is now Texas A&M Commerce. I guess I'm an honorary Aggie now. I took every art class they had, fine art and commercial. That was all before computers. Mm-hmm. And ended up working at a record store. But I finally got my art start at the Richardson Daily News, doing news graphics and ads. And that was also just before computers. So it was a lot of cut and paste. After that, I started at Texas Department of Highways, Texas Department of Transportation, and part-time at the Dallas Morning News. And that's where things really started to take off. Doing news graphics, I covered the San Francisco earthquake. I covered the invasion of Panama to catch Noriega. I covered a big map of the Branch Davidian compound in Waco. And we earned the Pulitzer Prize for investigative reporting on violence against women. From there, I went to the San Antonio Express News and spent several wonderful years in the Alamo City working there. Building my degree, I would do illustrations, design pages, love to illustrate a lot of the stories in the editorial section and the travel section. From there, I moved back to Dallas and got married and ended up working in-house at Texas Instruments, doing the marketing and branding for their calculators. I mean, I'm sure everyone has a Texas Instrument calculator or two in their desk drawer. It's now replaced by our smartphones. So just a lot of packaging. From there, I worked at BWC Creative, a small boutique studio that was a photo lab. And we did everything from logos and printing for small companies around Richardson to large museum exhibits, as you mentioned. The sixth floor museum, the Interurban Railway Museum in Plano, and I just loved telling those stories. I'm a storyteller. I'm an illustrator. I take all those words and all those words and pictures and combine them into a rich visual narrative that can communicate someone's story, be it a local city, electric trains. I did exhibits on oil and sheep shearing and Lee Harvey Oswald and just all those wonderful stories. I love to tell them in a rich visual format that really gives people. And then when that job closed down, boy, did I spend a year with the zombies, sending out resume after resume for a year. But during that time, I got married, moved. It was just really difficult. But I noticed checks started coming in the mail. A client would call me here or there. After about a year, I realized I was self-employed. And I've been really happy about that. But I was like, I wish I'd gotten that memo earlier. And
that's interesting. In terms of the journey, I want to. I don't mean to interrupt you, and I know there's maybe a little bit more now that when you're talking about being self-employed, and I know you're doing you have your own business now and things, and so we can talk about that. But one of the things I had a question on is in the beginning of your journey when you got out of school and you knew you were an artist. And part of why I'm asking this is one of my daughters an artist. She graduated from UNT, and is an art major in art history and nonprofit business, and has that kind of credentials. But then you get out of college, and you're not unique there, by the way. You get out of college, and the things that you thought you were going to study or do, or went to college for, you end up doing something completely different. How long were you in that mode where you're working at a record store, just trying to keep alive and pay the bills before you really started seeing things where you could actually directly apply your art? I'm sure your art was part of everything you did anyway, but how long was that process and what did that look like?
Yeah, like many people, even back then, I graduated and ended up back at home,
Yeah.
found a job. What the hardest thing that happened was during that time I was home, I literally got out the yellow pages. If you remember the big, thick yellow pages, and I called and wrote every advertising agency in town. Nothing. I had a portfolio the size of my desk, weighed about 50 pounds. Even my old teachers wouldn't, talk to me or help me. There was no transition from work to business, and so that was at the record store for 2 or 3 years. The most artistic thing I did there was paint the bin dividers with the name of the artist on it. But music's very close to art and very close to my heart. So, and then what finally ended that was my mother intervened. She had one of her best friends worked at the Richardson Daily News selling ads, and they said they needed someone, and they saw my talent and hired me. I was doing ads, I was doing graphics for the front page, I did some editorial cartoons, I did some illustration, and from there on it's been art all the way.
Well, that's beautiful. Actually, that's a brilliant illustration because, as we say in networking, right? It's people do business with people they know, like, and trust. And the first part is knowing. So your mom knew you. She knew, and she liked you. I hope your mom. Obviously she liked you, and she trusted you, and she introduced you then, or recommended you to another business or somebody.
Her friend.
Yeah, a friend. And, so that's kind of the way it works. People, we have a lot of listeners that are networkers and stuff. And I think things are sometimes not any more complex than that. And who's better than people that, are in your community, people that know you and love you. So that's brilliant. Well, so tell me, and I kind of interrupted you. So now we're kind of into you went through the unemployment challenges and things where you thought you were looking for another corporate job to get a paycheck, and all of a sudden, as a warrior, you found that the value you could provide didn't require actually working necessarily for somebody else, but in fact just going directly with for businesses, institutions, and so on. Any other part of that story, any zombies that got in the way of that from, whether it's in your mind or in your world at that point?
The zombies were, they were in my head. They were fear of being on my own, of not having work. There was the fear, there was the zombie internet, where you send away your resume and don't know what black hole it goes into or if they ever heard of you. And then towards the end of that, I found thanks to my men's work, I started, reaching out and meeting people, and I saw those checks coming in, and I'm like, this is pretty good. I got a big client with the City of Temple where I was living with my wife. She started working at the hospital there. And at one point I had been applying for jobs, and one of them finally came through and they offered me a job in Temple. And I was like, oh, this is great. And I'm like, wait a minute. This job doesn't pay anything. It's full time. It's a miserable client. Do I really want to stay where I'm at? I'm doing better here. Can this continue? And it was just like, That was really the hardest thing. Do I turn down a full-time gig with insurance and everything, or do I keep going?
Yeah, that's I'll tell you, you're not the only warrior that's there or gets to that cusp, and their thing is okay, the fear versus the faith of knowing that I have this unique value, that I can uh, monetize this value, and it isn't required to necessarily, but the wanting the benefits, wanting the coverage, the risk, it's risk versus reward, right? And sometimes the risk is manifest in the activity. Well, let's do this. I know we're kind of in the place where we're going to start talking about, kind of what you're doing today, why you're doing it, the unique value that you found. Because I know you're, brilliant in that respect. You just did a spotlight for our network yesterday, where you shared the incredible amount of stuff that you can do. But so let's take a quick break and talk about, then come back and talk about where you are, the value you provide, and where you're headed. So with that, let's listen to a little more of Ricky Jean Wright for the audio audience, and we'll be back with Don Huff and Warrior versus
It's
Zombie.
not a race to see how many people know your name. One day you realize time was worth more than the gold. It's not the getting there. When you get there, you'll know. Funny how wisdom and youth are always two different games.
All right, we are back. And Don, wow, you covered a lot of ground in that story, and I appreciate you sharing with us. I'm sure there's a whole ton more that we could learn from you, because again, you've overcome things. I think a lot of warriors today, entrepreneurs and stuff, we're either moving towards a plan B or a side hustle, or we've always wanted to do this. Like I said, I know I have some regular listeners who are artists, whether they're performing artists or whether they're art artists like you, or other things. And I know that this whole concept of keeping in motion and paying the bills, while gearing up to really get fully into your passion is always a challenge there. But so let's talk about why you're doing what you're doing today, and the unique value that you provide, and if anything were possible, what kind of impact would you have?
Okay. So what I do is I design and illustrate information that communicates, educates, inspires, and entertains. I do that through print, internet, exhibit space, whatever your information is. I think my unique value is the ability to come in and listen to your story, your personal story, your business story, your client story, and take all that information that you have and create it, turn it into something that's very visual and impactful, and really gets that story across to your clients wherever they may be. I've been in the business a long time and worked in many media. So if it's audio, video, exhibit, print, internet, social media, I can take and stylize and create that. And I do that by getting to know you and your story and your business message, or your history message in the case of the museums and stuff. Mm-hmm. And then I just interpret that visually. I collect the assets, I collect the designs, I really understand the content, because for me, the design and illustration comes out of the content. That's what inspires the design. It's the content itself. If it's an old story, it might have an old look. If it's a new story, it might have a very tech look. It might be more visual. It might be a lot more text. It's not just, here's a cool design, let me stuff your information into it. And I'm very good at helping people learn this process. I'm very good at drawing out the information. What do clients want to know? What do visitors want to know? What order to put it in? How to keep their attention? How to give them multiple points of entry? And I love telling beautiful stories, and I love the chance when I get to, my favorite thing is to do, full illustrations. And I have a lot of wonderful illustrations that doesn't come up a whole lot, but through illustrations, icons, design, the story is able to come out and be really captivating.
That's that is fast. That's I would say from what I know of you and just what I've seen of your work. I mean you said it in the way of how you do it, but really it's because I think your unique value comes from the fact that you are a storyteller. It's not just, I mean, you can create the cartoon, you can create the picture, you can create the art, but also kind of connecting the dots with the provider of the content and learning what their story is, where they're going. The same things we focus on this podcast is like, why are you doing what you're doing? What are you passionate about? Where are you going from here? And where do you want to take your audience? Where do you want to take the person that you're trying to communicate or persons that you're trying to communicate? And I think that comes from, if you listen to your rich story of the experiences that you've had where you've learned that you can take that unique value and apply it to many different media and or ways of doing it, which I think is brilliant. So what kind of impact, Don, I mean, if anything were possible, you mentioned that you today, there's countless entrepreneurs, you're focused on entrepreneurs, but, obviously, as an entrepreneur, there, people that have the value, that you can serve with what you have. But if anything were possible, which everything is possible in my world, what kind of impact would you have from the work that you're doing today?
Um, well, I think the impact I would like to have is for these some of these stories to last and to still be relevant and to be able to be told. I'm really clear that I'm telling your story. I don't try to make it my story or my design or my art. I do all my skills to tell your story because you're the one that's living it. You're the one that's presenting it. So, it's really great that, the impact that, my friends and family and strangers and visitors can go to a museum where I've created this entire exhibit. Or maybe some illustrations are still out there and make it big. And it's like, graphics I did from the newspaper. I still occasionally get, some calls from those things that are out there. There was a big one on the Texas City disaster that I did that I get calls from. I did a huge infographic on that. So I'd like to do that. And I'd, really like to get back to my own story at some point, but that hasn't happened yet. I did tell it a lot in college, both when I got my bachelor's and my master's, to telling my own story. But right now I'm committed to telling other stories. And like you said, I'm committed to teaching the next generation and teaching them what I feel good design and good visual communication is. So I hope that, some of the teaching will rub off on some of these kids.
Well, actually, it will. And it's interesting when we get further down our journey, like I am and like you are, as you learn a lot of things. It's like there's the commercial out there. We know things because we've seen things or whatever. And the brilliant thing about what it is as you've mentioned it, and we mentioned in your introduction, is you're now teaching the next generation. There's so much that you've learned over your journey and you've applied in a way that I think can really impact. And it's not just your work that your family comes back to see, but it's also the impact that the students that you have and those who hear and learn from your value can have on their world. So as my unique reason is to change the world one dream at a time, it's really, you can, that ripple effect of people, of you teaching somebody how to convey their thoughts with your unique value, and then they can take that on as brilliant, and it's really really exciting. So any other impact or whatever? I think we're at a point where we can take a quick break, and I want to come back to the what I call the land the plane segment, and when we get to the fourth segment here, after we hear a little bit of Ricky Jean Wright for the audio audience, I want to, if there's anything either you've said or haven't said yet, but if we take away anything from this podcast, what would you like us to take away? And then the last thing we'll do is have our audience understand how they can stay in touch with you. So let's take another quick break. We'll hear a little more of Ricky Jean Wright. It's Not the Getting There. We'll be back with Don Huff and Warrior versus Zombie.
Funny how wisdom and youth are always two different games. The years flew by so fast, is the common human complaint. The memories in our minds turn to diamonds in our soul, and by the grace of God, on down the road.
All right, we are back, and Don, wow. You know, it's always a challenge with people who've had so much journey like ourselves and try to compress it down, and there's so many things we probably could talk about. And who knows, maybe I'll have you back and we'll drill down on something in the, you know, in specifically in your space over time. But as I said before the break, if we take away anything from this podcast, what would you want us to take away?
It's the whole point of your podcast, Dave, the warrior's journey, the cyclical, circular nature of that, the descent, the challenges, the rising back up, and sharing that story with those around you. My story is about, you know, art and design, but it's also about, you know, personal growth and overcoming my fears and finding a group of supporters, finding that strength and courage in myself to do what I wanted, because I'd always wanted to be, you know, on my own, but I kept working for other people and it seemed like too terrifying. But I guess the biggest thing that changed my mind was the support group called the Mankind Project.
Okay.
And it just changed my life. And they're one of my clients too, one of my favorite clients. And just a lot of emotional intelligence and personal growth. And it gave me the courage to do what I needed to do. And I want to instill that in my students and my clients, to tell their story, to get it out there as best we can, to remember that it's an always evolving story and that we can change and add to it and alter it along the way. And that by changing my point of view, just 1 degree left or right, loosens everything up and allows me to take that next step forward. And I've been so happy about that because I always wanted to work on my own, and I'm doing that. And once I got over that fear and took that step, instead of just, you know, shivering in the corner waiting, you know, a whole new world's opened up. And it just takes, you know, a little shift in the way I think, and a lot of love and support. And so I appreciate getting that from you, Dave, and from all the other people in my life.
Yeah, there's so much brilliance, and I love hearing, number one, the journey, and hearing how warriors like yourself have kind of gotten to where they are today. And there's so many nuggets in there that we could pull out, and just your kind of the ups and the downs and the fear and the willingness to kind of reframe your thought process. A lot of times, you know, artists or anybody, you don't fully get to experience the possibilities that you have because you relegate yourself to the fear side of the equation, right? Which is getting a paycheck, which validates, if somebody's paying me every day or once a month or, you know, twice a month or every week, you know, whatever, then that means I must be doing something right? But that doesn't require that inner strength, that belief in your own warrior capabilities all ongoing to do something as dramatic or as life-changing as say, okay, I'm going to now let the marketplace define me, and I'm going to know that I'm going into it as with my unique value and with a God-given life purpose, and I'm headed in a direction, and I'm willing to have the faith that I'm going to keep moving down the road, and I'm not going to focus on all those fears. And that's one of the things that I hear in your story, aside from the amazing portfolio. I mean, it doesn't surprise me that you had a portfolio even when you were younger as the size of the desk, because I know you're very prolific in that regard. Well, if we want, I know we can get in touch with you on the Be Connected platform, and I know you're relatively new to the platform, so people viewing this replay or on here will be able to follow up with you there, and we'll get your profile and everything. And I know you'll be an amazing resource to that community. But how else can we get in touch with you, Don?
My website is donhuff.com, DONHUFF. Right there, I have, a portfolio of all my work, from print and book covers, illustrations, logos, branding, exhibits, just all the work I've created over the years. And that's the best place. I'm also on LinkedIn, and I have a little kind of a fun art page, Don Huff Design and Illustration, on Facebook, where some cartoons, some high school work, some current jobs, not real heavily there, and you might see me at some of the local networking events.
Right. Well, and we're going to be Be Connected is in 109 countries. We're going to get this kind of person-to-person type of interaction going for you. And like I said, I find your work to be brilliant. I think that there's unique value there, because there's a lot of people that can create great logos. There's a lot of people that can help you put a website together, or maybe do some amazing graphics. But being able to think through, hear the story, produce it in a visual way that communicates in ways that we can't even imagine. And your experience with doing that along the journey is just amazing. So I'm certain that there'll be a lot of folks here that will want to follow up with you, and I do appreciate. Thank you for sharing, being open to share, your journey with our warriors, and I'm certain that you're going to be providing value to the next generation and this generation for many days and years to come. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. It sounds like 2022 is going to be a good year.
Yes, it will. We're going to make it a good year. Like I said, people say, "How's it going, Dave?" And I say, "Always good," because that's a decision. It's not a statement of, how crazy things might be at any given point in time. I'm not waiting for anything to settle down before I determine that it's always good. So, well, with that, let's land the plane for this episode here. One last outro of Ricky Jean Wright, It's Not the Getting There. And we'll be back next week with another episode at 11 a.m. Central of Warrior vs. Zombie.
It's not the getting there, it's the journey every day. It's not a race to see how many people know your name. One day you realize time was worth more than the gold. It's not the getting there, when you get there you'll know. One day you realize time was worth more than the gold. It's not the getting there, when you get there, you'll know.